Committee will come to order. We want to thank everybody for being here today, and we'd like to recognize somebody in our audience. First of all, before we get to the business, I understand that we have a guest, Mr. Alex Bacon from Omaha, who is the son of one of our newest and greatest members. Let's hear it for Alex. All right. Anybody else got any relatives here today that we want to embarrass? If not, we want to again thank everyone for being here to hear from the Small Business Administration's Office of International Trade, the OIT. Increasing small business exports has been a top priority for this committee over the years, and I'm pleased to be receiving an update from the OIT on their efforts to better coordinate federal resources and help small businesses looking to export. There's no question that foreign markets hold incredible opportunities for America's small businesses. 95% of all consumers live outside the borders of the United States, and yet only 1% approximately of United States small businesses actually export. Only about 300,000 of America's small businesses out of the 26 million businesses that we have in this country. Unfortunately, many small businesses consider exporting to be out of reach. Some small businesses believe it's too expensive or too complicated to find potential customers. Other small businesses that start exploring the idea of exporting often just give up because the process becomes too confusing and or too complicated. I believe that these are the real barriers to trade. If we want to unleash America's most significant economic force, then we must make it easier for small businesses to participate in the global marketplace. It has become clear that we must compel the administration to continue its efforts to better coordinate federal resources so they are more efficient, streamlined, and better prepared to help businesses navigate the export process. In recent years, my colleagues and I have taken steps to do just that. Congress moved to strengthen America's small business export activities by expanding the SBA's role in export promotion. OIT was directed to increase coordination efforts between federal agencies engaged in export promotion, offer greater counseling and training to small businesses interested in expanding into foreign markets, and broaden its export finance counseling. Additionally, in 2015, Congress established the State Trade and Expansion Program, STEP. Replacing a 3-year pilot program, the STEP program awarded grants to states to strengthen their export agendas and assist small businesses looking to begin exporting or expand their existing export operations. Unfortunately, various Government Accountability Office and SBA Office of Inspector General reports have identified a number of real shortcomings at OIT. Alarmingly, some recommendations made by GAO nearly 5 years ago still have not been addressed. The STEP grant program is of particular concern to this committee. The OIG report released just this month found that the SBA was unable to provide consistent data regarding the program's awards and expenditures, and that the SBA has not been updating its data accurately. Furthermore, the report indicates that grant recipients left over 25% of their awarded funds unused. This leads me to believe that there were probably opportunities for small business exporters that were completely missed. What good is allocating this grant money if it isn't going to be administered properly, or worse, it goes completely unused? Finally, I would like to touch on another issue that has been raised in recent weeks, and that is the apparent lack of communication between the OIT and the Office of Advocacy. Last month, the United States and Argentina entered into a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, on, and I quote, joint cooperation or regulatory coherence and meaningful engagement with the private sector, unquote. I understand that the OIT did not make the Office of Advocacy even aware of the agreement or ask for input on it until the agreement was nearly finalized. I'm seriously concerned by this information. As I made clear, one of the things OIT is tasked with is coordinating federal agencies' export promotion efforts. If they are unable to coordinate within their own agency, I am led to believe that the OIT may be incapable of following through on its fundamental responsibilities. So today, we will hear from OIT's Associate Administrator, Peter, is it Kazamias?
Kazimias, yes.
Kazimias. I'm going to mispronounce that again a couple
That's
of times.
quite all right.
I apologize. You can call
Story
me
of my
anything you
life.
want to. Chabot, Shabbat, Cabot, Shabbat. On how the SBA plans to address the recommendations from the GAO and OIG, as well as how they plan to more efficiently and effectively assist America's small businesses hoping to join the global marketplace. And we again thank you for being here, and I'd now like to yield the ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Casamillas. Year after year, we are told that small businesses are the catalyst for the growth of the U.S. economy, and rightly so, as they create nearly 2/3 of net new jobs and are responsible for countless innovations. A critical subset of this group is small exporters. In fact, 300,000 small businesses are sending their products across the world, and 3 in 5 non-exporting firms are now interested in following suit. Firms that export grow faster, generate more jobs, and pay higher wages than other businesses. Clearly, for our economy to continue gaining steam, it will increasingly depend on global commerce to fuel expansion. Despite the advantages that come with trade, it remains exceedingly difficult for small businesses to enter foreign markets. Just 1% of small firms in this country are exporting their goods overseas. And even though small and medium-sized businesses account for 97% of American exporting companies, their exports count for only 1/3 of all U.S. goods shipped overseas. The challenges small firms face are multifaceted. It takes time to identify foreign markets, to target new customers, and to learn the ins and outs of the exporting process. Nearly 40% of small businesses say they do not export because they simply do not know where to start. Over half of small business exporters spend a minimum of 3 months and nearly 10% of their annual operating revenue just preparing to export. Compounding this obstacle is that they often have fewer resources to expend on developing a trade strategy or complying with complex regulations. As a result, they consistently enter fewer foreign markets than their larger counterparts, with nearly 60% only entering one, while more than half of large firms export to 5 or more markets. These difficulties are something we must be mindful of as the administration works to negotiate NAFTA. In theory, balanced free trade agreements have the potential to be a significant driver of growth. By eliminating tariffs and other barriers to trade, they can help small firms expand sales globally and create jobs at home. In order for these benefits to be fully realized, however, we must hold our trading partners accountable for unfair trade practices and ensure that our small businesses receive the level playing field they were promised. Truth be told, small businesses often face challenges when it comes to competing with foreign imports produced in countries with lower labor and non-existent environmental standards. Time and again, we are told about new markets, but little discussion is given to the low-priced goods that will spill onto our domestic marketplace. Good for consumers? Maybe. Good for small businesses? Definitely no. Regardless of this larger debate, it is absolutely critical that small businesses are able to compete with their larger counterparts by participating in this global marketplace. I would like to thank our witness, and I look forward to hearing how SBA export promotions are serving our small businesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. If committee members have opening statements prepared, we'd ask they be submitted for the record. And I'll take just a moment to explain our timing rules here, which is pretty simple, 5 minutes. The yellow light will come on after you've gone 4 minutes, and that'll let you know you got a minute to go, and then the red light will come on. Since we just have One witness here this morning. If you need a little bit more time, we'll understand that as long as it doesn't go on too long. And then we'll all question you 4 or 5 minutes. And I'd now like to introduce our one witness here today, who is Peter Casamias. And he's the Associate Administrator for the Office of International Trade, the OIT, at the Small Business Administration. Mr. Casamias has extensive experience in international commerce, having worked in the United Kingdom, Hong Kong, and India. Prior to serving at the SBA, he spent 7 years in the energy industry with FMC Technologies in Houston, Texas. Mr. Casamias also served as a Marine, graduating from Officer Candidate School in 1997 and went on to the Basic School and Naval Justice School, and we thank you for your service. Associate Administrator Casamias, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, and esteemed members of the subcommittee. I want to thank you for having me here to give my speech and to hear your important views. About 3 weeks ago, I was honored to accept Administrator McMahon's appointment and begin my service as Associate Administrator for International Trade at the Small Business Administration. And today, I am honored to be able to meet with you and to listen to your important views on small business and trade. Since starting at the SBA, I have been familiarizing myself with the role of the Office of International Trade and its function in helping small business grow and thrive through exports and involvement in global commerce. Administrator McMahon believes that exporting is an essential component of small business growth because, as mentioned, 95% of the world's consumers and over 3/4 of all existing purchasing power exists outside the U.S. border. Just a few weeks ago, I accompanied Administrator McMahon to the United Nations, where she signed a proclamation naming June 27th as Micro, Small, and Medium-Sized Enterprise International Day. And in so doing, she helped bring about international recognition to the vital role of small businesses in producing innovation, creativity, and job growth. Today, among over our 28 million small businesses, also as mentioned, a very small percentage can claim the title of exporter. The Office of International Trade is charged by statute to improve upon the 1% number cited. Its stated mission involves 1, increasing the number of U.S. small businesses that export, and 2, increasing the dollar volume of U.S. small business exports. The SBA, under the leadership of Administrator McMahon, will address this dual mission by focusing on 3 critical needs small businesses have when attempting to export. First is the need for information. The SBA Office of International Trade recognizes that guidance and support for small businesses is crucial to achieving a foothold in the international marketplace. As such, OIT has a network of 21 export finance managers based in U.S. export assistance centers who provide counseling on international payment risks and U.S. government export financing options. 2 is the need for capital. Small businesses cannot trade and export to these new markets unless they have access to capital, specifically trade finance. Small businesses are hardest hit by trade finance gaps and compliance challenges. In the United States, over 1/3 of all small businesses find financing harder to obtain for foreign sales than for domestic sales. Given this challenge, the SBA works with lenders to provide tailored trade finance loan guarantees so that small businesses can finance their foreign sales and growth where the private sector is unable or unwilling to act because of real or perceived risks. 3 is the need among small businesses for overseas promotional products and market access. OIT emphasizes the importance of small business export promotion by strengthening its partnership with the state and territory governments through the State Trade Expansion Program, known as STEP, and through its chairmanship of the Trade Promotion Coordinating Committee's Small Business Working Group. This is a group of interagency representatives dedicated to the mission of increasing the number of small business exporters. And OIT also ensures that the interests of small business are adequately represented in bilateral and multilateral trade negotiations, always pressing for transparency, flexibility, and coherence in trade agreements so that foreign trade regulations do not unnecessarily burden U.S. small business exporters. I am able to attest to the dynamic power of exporting and international trade and the effect it has on small businesses and local communities. I hail from the South Texas border city of Laredo, located in the north bank of the Rio Grande, Laredo's economy is virtually entirely based on international trade, and it serves as one of the largest land ports in the United States. After graduating from Yale University, I served as an intern for the U.S. Commercial Service in Mexico City, where the negotiation of NAFTA was at the time a pressing issue. As a law student at the University of Texas, I studied and examined NAFTA's dispute resolution mechanisms. And more recently, in my professional life, I drove the Asia-Pacific financial operations as the regional CFO for Insituform Technologies, a U.S.-based pipeline company. I then lived in Delhi, India, and led the operational turnaround of Insituform's flagship Asian operating company. I mention these background facts only to convey to you that I possess a long-standing interest in and familiarity with international trade and international business, and I intend to bring my practical, real-world business experience to bear in this role to help U.S. small businesses grow and prosper. To conclude, I wish to say that under the able leadership of Administrator McMahon, I will be committed to ensuring that our small businesses, exporters, find all the support they need to be able to expand into international markets. I furthermore will endeavor to effectively and efficiently administer the Office of International Trade. My goal is to enable OIT to expand the footprint of small businesses in the overseas marketplace, thereby spurring innovation and employment growth here at home. And with that, I wish to thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes to begin the questioning. Mr. Casamillas, as you mentioned, you've been in your position all of 3 weeks now, so we obviously don't hold you responsible for anything that happened prior to you being there, unless, of course, you screw some up in the 3 weeks you've been there. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I do have real concerns regarding the OIT's lack of coordination with the Office of Advocacy. As the Associate Administrator for the Office of International Trade, will you commit to us to notifying the Office of Advocacy of any future MOUs or other agreements relating to international regulatory cooperation and small businesses, and will you defer to the Office of Advocacy on those matters?
Chairman Shabbat, thank you for the question. I say without qualification, yes. I will absolutely, in my role, endeavor to keep the Office of Advocacy engaged and check with them every time we are having an MOU on the horizon.
Thank you. That was the right answer. So we appreciate it. A recent OIG report raises concerns about the Office of International Trade's oversight practices. Evidence suggested that 4 of the grants reviewed by OIG never received the required approvals from the Associate Administrator of OIT. How will OIT work to ensure that the STEP grant funds receive the proper approval going forward?
Thank you, Chairman Shabbat. This is one of the issues that I have inherited, and we are taking a systematic approach to documentation oversight procedures. We have contracted already, and the office has contracted a consultant, a Six Sigma lean operations consultant, to take a look at all of our processes, mapping the entire process out and identifying areas that are critical to quality, finding where there are gaps, reducing redundancies, and we hope that at the end of this process, we're going to have a process that actually is more comprehensive and effective in being able to address some of the issues that have existed in the past.
Thank you. The OIG reviewed the SBA's STEP grant program to determine how funds were used. According to the OIG, the SBA was unable to provide consistent data for fiscal years 2011 through 2015. In fact, every office they met with provided different totals for each year. What steps will the OIT take to ensure more accurate and greater consistency in its financial reporting?
Thank you, Chairman Shabbat. This, as I understand, is part of the old reporting structure before fiscal year 2014, where discrepancies between various elements of the SBA were found. My understanding is that there is a new reporting structure in place. This, coupled with the approach we are now taking at mapping out processes and revamping our entire operational process for financial reporting and for documentation of milestone achievements, should produce the desired results.
All right, thank you. Congress authorized the STEP grant program to promote exports and expand trade opportunities at the state level. The OIG found that in more than half of the grants they reviewed, the participants did not spend the majority of the funds. How will the OIT establish and document its oversight procedures so that STEP program managers can monitor the grant recipients' progress more closely and help them meet their goals?
Thank you. This is an issue that is currently under investigation, and I want the committee to know that we are looking at all possibilities as to understanding where the process may have failed in the past. Whether it is an administrative issue, in year 0, the applicants may have had certain needs. In year 1, they have changed. If this is the case and the reason for the gap, then we need to look at potentially creating new variation orders, change orders, and the like. However, maybe it is a problem of incentives. If that is the case, then the oversight process that is coming out of this new look at our procedures may very well answer the issue. The point is, I think that we are undertaking a comprehensive look at all of our processes, and we think that this is one of the things we're going to have in mind to be able to produce a more consistent results without that kind of without those kinds of gaps.
Thank you. I think I've got time to squeeze in one last question here. The committee has heard concerns with the OIT's grant management and administration practices. There are a variety of federal agencies that manage much more complex grants. I'm wondering, has anyone from the SBA consulted with other federal agencies to identify more efficient ways to administer the STEP program?
Thank you, Chairman Shabbat. This is a question I will take under advisement, and I will provide an answer to your office as soon as I have one.
All right, thank you very much. My time has expired. The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Exporting is a key component of small business growth. Yet only 1% of small businesses are currently exporting overseas. I've been here for 25 years. This is the list of all trade agreements that we have been able to get signed by the United States. From Chile, Colombia, Jordan, Korea, NAFTA, CAFTA, Panama, Singapore, Peru Trade Promotion Agreement. And every time that we have held hearings on trade agreements, we always raise the issue about the potential, the economic potential of small exporters. And time and again, we hear 1% of small exporters are doing business overseas with one customer. So my question to you is, while free trade agreements had opened up new markets and is always being sold to us and to the American people as they are going to benefit small businesses, it is clear that large corporations are the primary beneficiaries. It was 1% 25 years ago when we were discussing trade agreements, and today is only 1%. So what changes to free trade agreements will have the biggest impact on small firms?
Thank you, Ranking Member Velasquez.
And I hope that you are all evaluating and discussing what changes, because the president is committed to renegotiate NAFTA. So here you have it.
Yes, Ranking Member Velasquez. Well, I will take the information you provided very seriously. What I can say is that it is clear that we are taking a look at all of our free trade agreements anew. I just came back last week from a trade deficit panel where we were meeting with business owners from all over the United States, Colorado, North Carolina, and Maine. And we were looking at the legacy of our free trade agreements. And that legacy seems to be massive deficits. And the implication or the ramification of those massive deficits has been high unemployment and shuttered industry.
I know all that. I want to know that now we are going to renegotiate the administration trade agreement. The chairman and I, we sit with eye
to eye.
What is the name? Right, the Hagen Commission, and we are going to be providing input into this. So it will be helpful to us if you explain to us what are the recommendations, since you are traveling and listening to small exporters throughout the nation, so that we could make those recommendations. Let's go to the STEP program. It was authorized in 2010, right?
That is my understanding.
So what? So the STEP program was authorized, is matching funds that are provided to the states. And how are you measuring whether this program is actually generating benefits to small firms? What metrics are you using to measure the program's success?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Velasquez. Only 3 weeks into the position, this is one of the issues I have to get my hands around. I do know that we use an ROI matrix that involves the dollars of exports that were generated as a result of our programs touching the businesses versus the cost to administer. But I will get a more precise and more robust answer for you as soon as I can.
And can you tell the committee, and if we don't have time, would you please send to the committee what specific activities are authorized under this program? Otherwise, I will conclude that this is simply subsidizing state expenses. So those metrics are important, and what type of activities are authorized to be to use the funds for.
OIT will provide that information summarily. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lukemeyer, who is the vice chairman of this committee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank Mr. Casamillas for being here today. Just to follow up on a couple things here, I think the chairman made comment in his earlier remarks that GAO indicated that the past administration over 5 years hadn't done anything to fulfill some of their recommendations, and so that's also in here. There's some collaboration and coordination things that haven't been done, and so the bar is pretty low for you from a standpoint that we wonder why we don't have an economy that's growing, and we have something like this SBA, which is supposed to stimulate growth, and here we've twiddled our thumbs for 5 years, which brings me to the point. GAO also found that only 15% of some individuals' time was being spent on the export promotion responsibilities. Can you tell me that these individuals who are spending 15% of their time doing their job, are they working on other jobs? Are they watching movies on their screens or whatever else they're doing? Or what are we doing here?
Congressman, I take the message very clearly, and I will commit to examining in this issue.
Okay. Just kind of curious. We do have examples of some of the employees being caught, playing games and watching videos and things on their tube. And so, when GAO says this, is it something like that, or are they actually just have overlapping duties that they're actually doing other things instead of doing their job? I mean, there's other things they could be doing productively, I assume. With regards to from your experience with regards to exporting, what would you see the barriers for small business to export that you can help them overcome with your new job?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Lukemeyer. I think that the three areas where we are able to provide the most effective assistance is in information, especially for new exporters, so that we can give them an idea of how to go about internationalizing their business, as well as in capital, because the Office of International Trade does act in areas where there is a perceived or actual risk that the private sector does not wish to act in providing trade finance. So I think in providing that kind of liquidity is an area where we're able to assist. And then thirdly, in market access, in coordinating dual trade missions with businesses and connecting them with overseas markets is something we are committed to doing.
One of the things that Congress is looking at, as well as the President has suggested, is a border adjustment tax or some sort of leveling of the playing field fee whenever products come into the country. Have you seen the problem on exports going out, where our companies have been hurt by the ability to compete because of the border adjustment tax of other countries? And have you discussed it with small folks yet with regards to them having a fee perhaps imposed on some of their inputs that they turn around and have to export? And it's kind of a complicated situation, but I'm just curious if you looked at it all or if you have any comments.
Yes, Congressman McNamara, I just got back last week from a trade deficit panel at the Department of Commerce, and just as you alluded to, the data points, which are very few still, are mixed. It does seem that the idea of a border adjustment tax has been received with mixed feelings on the part of small businesses. In some cases, they support it even though it will make their products more expensive. In other cases, they believe that it's going to make their products more competitive with imports. So I think we're at the beginning of the process in terms of a listening tour and data gathering, and I hope to be able to synthesize that information and be able to provide a more robust answer at some point throughout my tenure.
Okay. One last question here with regards to trade agreements. You were with their director at the United Nations here recently. Are you, whenever they have trade negotiations, or the SBA director herself, at the table whenever these negotiations take place, so that you can represent small businesses and their problems or concerns with these agreements?
The Office of International Trade does have trade specialists who do perform the commander's guidance. So we have specialists who actually do this.
Okay, so there is somebody representing the small business folks' interests whenever a trade agreement is negotiated.
That is
right?
That is exactly true.
Okay, and I assume that the agreements that we have been in place for many, many years, and a lot of them probably just need to go back and retweak them and make sure that, are you a part of those negotiations, or have you pointed those out to the president or the administration or the trade authorities?
Yes, Congressman. We are starting out with the commercial dialogue with a number of nations as we are taking a look at these trade agreements anew.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Evans, who's the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to statistics from the U.S. Census, export from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania declined by 7.3% from 2015 to 2016. There's a number of possible reasons for this decline, but I'm interested in supporting efforts of more small businesses to educate themselves in the possibility to seek customers outside of the U.S. And to that end, most accounts of the Office of International Trade does a good job of helping businesses, my understanding. But I'm concerned about the level of coordination between U.S. Export-Import Bank, the Commerce Department, and other similar federal agencies which assist. Could you please describe how you communicate with these other agencies, being that I understand three weeks there, but in terms of your vision of coordinating with those other agencies?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Evans. Yes, as you mentioned, it is only 3 weeks, but to my understanding, we are involved with the TPCC, which is a group of interagency of different agencies that provide a common framework for all the tools the federal government has at its disposal to help small businesses export. And this is one of the main ways that we coordinate with other agencies through chairing the small working group at the TPCC.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, in terms of your own vision of it, I understand. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, my thoughts are that it's going to be very important that we run the Office of International Trade effectively and efficiently. And if that means that there are ways to streamline by coordinating with other agencies, that is something that we're all going to be for. It's much better to work in concert with other agencies than in a silo. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. The internet and platforms such as eBay have broken down barriers to exploiting small firms. What can the federal government learn from these entries, such as eBay has tried to convince more small firms to consider exploiting?
We think the internet is a fabulous tool for innovation and growth, and so I can commit to you that it will be one of the very many different areas we look at to try and imitate in terms of innovation.
you have any specific ideas at this point on? I know.
I'm sorry, Congressman, only 3 weeks into the job, I can't say I have any fully formed ideas yet.
Okay.
on
no
this
problem,
issue.
No problem. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Nebraska, the father of Alex Bacon, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your transparency and jumping in the job like you have, and we wish you well.
Thank you, Congressman.
I wanted to make sure I understood the differences of what some of the other agencies are doing out there. I know the Import-Export Bank, for example, supports a lot of our small businesses in our district. Could you help distinguish how you all differ with them and how you support small business and exports?
Well, I think there are two areas there where I could speak to that. One is in terms of the trade finance that we offer, but more importantly, I think one of the most greatest differentiators of the Small Business Administration is that it is specifically focused on small businesses, and it's our reason for being. And this is something that is important to keep in mind, because by focusing on small businesses, it does help avoid the bang for the buck approach that ends up creating an overconcentration of focus and resources on the larger entities.
Okay, thank you. And one thing that intrigues me is the Matchmaker program and how you match the small businesses up with folks who help them reach access in other countries. Can you talk a little more about how that program's working? How many, I think hasn't been in existence for a long time. How many of these forums have you had, and how's it working?
Congressman, I don't have that information at my disposal at this moment, but I will get it for you and we'll send it over to your office.
Okay, thank you.
Go
And
ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Thank you. The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Murphy, who is the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Contracting and Workforce, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for being here today. I appreciate your testimony. As you mentioned in your testimony, access to capital remains a significant barrier for small firms to access foreign markets. And according to a recent survey by the National Small Business Association, only 40% of small businesses were even aware of the SBA export lending programs. So 2 questions for you. One, do you think that the existing export loan programs are enough to meet the financing needs? And then secondly, what SBA plans do you have to better educate small businesses about the availability of the export loan programs?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. This is definitely one of the largest challenges I have inherited, is understanding how to broaden our reach so that more small businesses are aware of the levers at their disposal at the Small Business Association. What I can say is that even now, the Small Business Association Small Business Administration is undertaking dialogues with local small businesses in Illinois, where there is a listening tour going on with the National Association of Manufacturers to understand exactly where our best practices have lied, what has been helpful, what has not been helpful. This is intended to not only improve the quality of our outreach, but also the breadth of it. So we are undertaking efforts to do exactly this.
Why just in Illinois?
Oh, this is the beginning. This is one of our first stops. This is going to continue throughout a number of different states. I know Texas is next, and there will be many others on the way.
Great. Do you know if Florida will be on your list?
I intend to put it on the list.
Great,
Congresswoman.
thanks. And moving on to a different topic, the theft of intellectual property has become a real major problem in global business environment, particularly for small firms. And this is because they often lack the knowledge and the resources needed to adequately protect their IP abroad. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office found that only 15% of small firms conducting businesses overseas know that they need to file for IP protection abroad. And this is really concerning. What does SBA plan to do to help small business owners guard themselves against theft of their IP in overseas markets?
Thank you for the question. I think I can say that we are going to take this issue very seriously and incorporate it as to one of the points that we use when we counsel small businesses in exporting.
So you intend to integrate it into the baseline training?
That is going to be something we're definitely going to look at. The message has been received very well, and it's going to be something that we're going to have to look at more seriously.
Great, thank you, and I'll yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Kansas, Dr. Marshall, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I guess, tell me some examples. Who's doing a great job working with you? Can you give us some examples of some small companies that you really think are working well with your people?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Marshall. I think in the fullness of time, I will be able to provide more examples when I have more information at my hand.
All right. I represent some small businesses that make precision agriculture products. And if I would go back and visit with them and say, this is what your your branch of government could help them with, what would you tell them? What would you want me to tell them that you're going to help them? And they do have some access to some markets in Europe now, but boy, they could sure use a boost.
Thank you for the question, Dr. Marshall. I think that one of the functions of the OIT is to try and open up foreign markets and make introductions between our domestic companies and foreign markets. So a number of the export centers will be able to counsel some of these small businesses and promote dual trade missions overseas, or get involved in the matchmaking program, or even through the STEP program to try and enhance that market access.
Okay. I guess my last question, what can we do to help you do your job better? What can we do in Congress to empower you?
Thank you for the question. I could not presume to give you advice only 3 weeks in, but what I can commit to is that my office will have a virtuous information loop with your offices so that when we can do something, provide some sort of information that will help us be successful and help you be more successful, we will certainly provide that information.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York, Mr. SBA, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Velasquez, for this hearing. Thank you for your testimony. As the borders of the global market keep expanding, it is crucial that small businesses can benefit from this expansion and be competitive in a variety of arenas, especially in the topics related to export. The Small Business Administration Office of International Trade is an essential part of the development initiatives that will enhance and are strictly focused on improving the chances that small businesses will succeed in their economic ventures. The Hamilton Project, specifically relating to this discussion in a paper titled Minority and Women Entrepreneurs, Building Capital Networks and Skill, has signaled that research shows that minority women-owned businesses rely significantly more on investments of personal or family wealth rather than on outside debt or equity. This clearly sets some minority and women-owned businesses at a disadvantage, especially when their families do not have the wealth to help them start out and maintain a business. My questions will focus on the constraints of the trade deals that many U.S. small businesses could choose to engage with, the countries, mainly NAFTA and DR-CAFTA. I know that there are significant hurdles placed by those trade deals on even big businesses, packaging, transportation, the hygienic level of the products that they may want to export, intellectual property. These are issues that are very cumbersome and often very difficult for even big businesses to engage with. Are there any particular plans to help particularly minority women-owned and veteran-owned businesses to overcome these major hurdles that even large corporations often have some difficulties with? Otherwise, they're just not going to be. There's not going to be a real opportunity for small businesses to engage in trade outside of the United States. Do you have any roadmap as to how you're going to assist them?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Yes, I think there is a dual answer to your question, or a two-part answer. First is that the Office of International Trade, the Small Business Administration, does have programs that are dedicated to veteran, to women-owned businesses, and to minorities for counseling. But moreover, even at the Office of International Trade, we will be negotiating, we have individuals who will be negotiating trade deals with the idea of transparency in mind, because we understand fully, and I understand fully, having lived in India and having done business in India, the difficulty of compliance costs, even on medium-sized businesses, the difficulty of having to repatriate capital back to the United States or register your business overseas. So yes, I could not agree with you more. It has a disproportionate impact on small businesses, and we will be negotiating those trade agreements with the interests of small business in mind.
Okay, my last question is why is there a particular reason for which there hasn't been consistency with regards to the grant awards and expenditures in the past years?
I understand the question, and I thank you. One of the things that I have learned as I've inherited this is that there were old reporting procedures that led to discrepancies. We are now taking a systematic approach. Look at our processes. Again, identifying areas that are critical to quality, identifying areas where there are redundancies, and we're going to map out an entirely new process, taking a process-based approach that we think will have a more robust and effective end towards this issue.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
Thank you, gentleman. Yields back. The gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Estes, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have more of a comment and maybe asking for a commitment for a longer term. In my district, we have a lot of involvement in trade. Most of that's with some of our larger manufacturing and aerospace companies, as well as a lot of the agriculture companies that are there. But we also have a lot of smaller businesses, particularly machine shops and other type product manufacturers in particular. And the message that I hear is the struggle to figure out what resources they have and how do they engage in that marketplace. And I know we were talking earlier about which one of us was newer on our roles, our respective roles. But I guess I would throw the challenge down to you and ask if you would strongly consider as you're developing your role how to support and work with those smaller businesses to help them get a better leg up and get as much of as a percentage of the international marketplace as they do within the domestic market.
I commit to that without reservation, Congressman. That is, in fact, my mandate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from New York, Ms. Clark, is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our ranking member, Member Velasquez. Foreign markets offer new opportunities for small business entrepreneurs to unleash their creative talents, whether it's a craft product on Etsy or an industrial component for an automobile. Each stand to benefit from the untapped potential of consumer markets abroad. However, the United States trade deficit is over $40 billion. This means that foreign actors hold a large amount of American currency and exercise influence over its value. This impacts everything from the price of fruit in the local grocery store to the cost of consumer electronics and basic clothing expenses at big box stores. When trade imbalances exist, consumers, often working families, are the most affected. These two factors, foreign consumer markets and foreign influence over the value of our currency, why it's so important for the SBA to help facilitate small business exports. So my questions are in that vein. The new administration and Donald Trump's budget proposes cutting the SBA's budget by 5%. Have you examined how such a decrease could impact OIT's ability to carry out its mission and promote America's exports? And if so, how?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. The mantra at the SBA is to run this office effectively and efficiently, so we will see this as a great opportunity to be able to do more with less.
I've been hearing more with less for the past decade, and I've yet to see it produce, especially when you look at 1%. So let's try to use creativity and innovation. Congress, do you think that existing SBA export loan programs are enough to meet the financing needs of small businesses, and or do gaps still remain?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. This is an issue that I will definitely have to get my hands around to understand exactly where the distribution of demand is, exactly where our supply is hitting, and where there are gaps. This is one of the primary initiatives that I hope to be able to fulfill in the near term in my role.
Very well. And Congress is currently discussing ways of reforming the taxation of earned income abroad. How would a change in the treatment of foreign income impact OIT's efforts? And what do you view as OIT's role in training small businesses about changes to the tax code, if they are made, in order to assure that these entrepreneurs and assure this Congress that there will be no undue hardship as a result?
Thank you, Congresswoman. The Office of International Trade has its purpose to try to internationalize small businesses and make them exporters. If tax policy is something that becomes a critical component of being able to help small businesses export, I can only assume that our trade finance experts will be able to provide the necessary counseling so that they can become exporters, because that is our purpose.
And is that something that you would personally be examining to make sure that there aren't any unintended consequences?
I can personally commit to ensuring that whatever tax policy implications will come down the pike, we will incorporate that or examine it very carefully and incorporate it into our counseling sessions as needed.
Very. I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from American Samoa, Ms. Radawagan, who is the chairman of Subcommittee on Health and Technology, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Talofa lava. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Velasquez, for holding this hearing. Mr. Casamillas, thank you for testifying.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
So, Mr. Casamillas, what does the SBA estimate it spent on export promotion activities in FY 2016? Does this include export financing, small business development centers, export counseling, the export-related activities of the district offices, and STEP program? If not, how much did the SBA spend on the activities in FY 2016?
Thank you, Congresswoman. My office does have the breakdown of those numbers, and we will supply it to your office.
Thank you very much. I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Adams, who's the ranking member of Subcommittee on Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Velasquez, for hosting the hearing today, and Mr. Casamillas. Is that correct?
Yes, that is
Thank you very much
correct.
for your testimony. You talked a little bit about the small women-owned businesses, and of course, I had a question, but I wanted to just add to that. And you talked about what you all were going to do, or what you think you might do. I wanted to add rural businesses to that. As a part of that, I have a special interest in women-owned businesses and those that are socially and economically disadvantaged, and making sure that there's equal opportunity in terms of this process, particularly the STEP proposals as they come across your desk, the weight that you give them. But I probably don't need to ask that question. It sounded like you are going to be focusing, at least to some degree, on that. But let me ask about the discretion that's provided to you by the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act in helping to assist these disadvantaged communities. Do you find that that's going to be helpful to you?
Thank you, Congresswoman. This is something, whether it's going to be helpful, I don't have the information at hand, but I'm sure I can assure you that the importance of minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses is very high on the priority list of this administration, of this Small Business Administration. Knowing the identity of our administrator, of Administrator McMahon, you can understand that she also finds it of the utmost importance. And I know that we, even last year, we're awarding Exporter Lender of the Year to entities and banks that have shown outstanding performance in making SBA loans to minority-owned businesses. So it's something that's very high on the visibility and that we have a commitment to.
Great, thank you. When we look at the businesses that are growing the fastest, they're women-owned business, and more specifically, African-American women-owned businesses. But let me ask another question. Do you have any data available about STEP proposals that have been approved from rural, women-owned, and socially economic disadvantaged businesses that you may have taken a look at?
I will have my office take a look at that and provide it to yours.
Okay, great. And follow-up to that, I was interested in the percentages, and I know you're just getting started, and certainly I wish you well, But also in terms of the percentages that are submitted by rural, women-owned, and socially economic disadvantaged businesses, I'm just curious about the data that's been kept and what those percentages might be, as well as not only what the numbers are, but what the approval rate of those have been.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Whatever information we have in terms of the breakdown, we are going to provide it to your office, so I can.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you. The
Thank you.
gentlelady yields back, and I know the chair's not supposed to comment on these kind of things, but that's one beautiful hat, I think.
And I thank you very much for saying that. It's one of my 1,094 in my collection, and I'm wearing this as far as my birthday celebration for this week. But
All
thank
right.
you very
Well,
much.
happy birthday. Yeah, excellent. Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Blum, who is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Agriculture, Energy, and Trade, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman Chavit, and I concur with you on my colleague's hat. It's very beautiful. I was admiring that. And also, I was not aware, but that's a great statistic about female minority-owned businesses growing amongst the fastest businesses. That's tremendous. Good to hear. Thanks for being with us today, Mr. Casamillas.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Glad to hear you're from the private sector, and you've had a tremendous amount of experience in international business as well, I have read. I'd like to have your personal thoughts on TPP. With your international trade experience, you must have some thoughts on that agreement.
Well, Congressman, I think the current administration's new approach of looking at trade agreements on a one-to-one basis is really badly needed. Clearly, it's important that we start reevaluating what our trade posture is, so that we don't run the kinds of deficits we have historically, and give a better chance to our domestic producers in being able to compete.
So I take it that you did not like TPP because of the framework, because it was not bilateral, or?
Well, I believe that a one-to-one type of trade posture is going to be beneficial.
And what are your feelings on NAFTA?
Initially, of course, back in 1992, and I'm from the border country, I was initially supportive of it. I saw the burgeoning growth that it had, the effect it had in my city. But after 25 years, we have a lot more data points. We have a lot more in the way of data points now, and I've unfortunately seen what the legacy of these trade deficits are, and they are shuttered industries and high unemployment. So it's high time we take a new look at our trade agreements.
XM Bank, they provide financing for export activities in the private sector as well. Does the OIT, Office of International Trade, work in conjunction with the XM Bank? Do they provide loans maybe to smaller businesses that XM Bank would not look at? Because one of the things when we debated reauthorization of XM Bank was, well, the majority of the funding or the benefits go to 5 companies, 5 mega corporations, and that you don't focus enough on small businesses. So do you work with them? How is that relationship?
The level of coordination between the two entities is something I'm going to have to get back to you on, Congressman, but I will say, just it speaks to what I was saying earlier about the differentiating value of the Small Business Administration, being able to focus on small businesses so that we don't take that bang for the buck approach.
Do we track the revenues, the export revenues of small businesses? Do we have that number? Does the SBA have that number?
Yes, we track the export revenues that are a result of SBA counseling and SBA financing.
And what has that trend been? What are those numbers over the last 3 years?
Let me before I take a guess, let me have my office provide those numbers so I can be specific. I don't wish to make a mistake in my testimony.
Because particularly in government, the federal government, we talk a lot, but as opposed to the private sector, seems like we're not so concerned about results sometimes. And I think we need to do a good job. I'm just would offer this advice to you of measuring things. And every time you testify here, I'm going to be asking you, is that trend up? Is that trend in the right direction? Are our small businesses, in fact, exporting more to foreign countries than they were last year?
I sympathize with the sentiment, and I will be prepared.
What would you say are the main ways, the main methods that your office is going to help small businesses export?
I think there are again, three ways that we're going to be able to help them export, and that's one, providing them the liquidity they need, especially for first-time exporters, but also for people who have been, businesses that have been successful in exporting. We're going to be able to provide them international trade loans that are going to help them expand their PP&E. Secondly, in opening up the markets and making connections between our domestic businesses and foreign markets and foreign buyers of domestic products.
And I am a small business owner, and we are in the software business, and access to capital is important. I get that, but I think before the access to capital, you need the connections. You just mentioned that, connections. Can you talk to me in the 29 seconds we have left about how is your office going to help small businesses connect with foreign entities that need their products?
Certainly, we have been coordinating with the states through the STEP program to conduct dual trade missions, joint trade missions, and to be able to have that kind of state cooperation, so we can have those people who are closer to the businesses and understand what their needs are, make those connections to foreign entities.
So you always remember that connection is the first step before we need access to capital. They need that connection. They need a buyer, international buyer that's interested in their product.
Well
so
received.
I hope you emphasize that. And
well
my
received.
time is over, and I yield
expired.
back the time I don't have, Mr. Chairman.
That's right. The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Lawson, who's a ranking member of the Subcommittee on Health and Technology, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you for being with us today. When I read the staff report, I thought it was very fascinating and very revealing to look at the report that said only 1% of small business was conducting trade. And secondly, when they said that over 95% of people outside of this country were consumers. And I know that you've had a great deal of international experience in this particular area. So my question was centered around, will it be financially feasible for small businesses to look more towards international trade, even though I've heard a lot of questions here this morning from a lot of the members about what we need, access to capital and so forth. But in 2017, when you see only 1% of small business, and many of them in America, not engaging in international trade, how do you respond to that? Is it financially feasible? Is it just something that we shouldn't be involved in? I'm not really sure.
Congressman Lawson, that is a terrific question, and it is one of the challenges that we have to meet up to be able to expand the number of U.S. businesses and the percentage of U.S. businesses that are exporting internationally. I think it's worthy of investigation to determine whether it is a perception issue, whether there's simply not the lack of awareness that it's important to diversify your customer base, to create new lines of revenue and find those international customers, or whether there's the perception that it's just too difficult. But I do believe that with the various trade financing options that exist at the Small Business Administration, we make it financially feasible. So perhaps it is something that we're going to have to investigate to understand if there is a perception or a lack of awareness, and if so, we need to figure out how to improve our outreach.
And as a follow-up, did you say at one time you was in India?
I lived in India for an entire year.
Okay, and I was trying to understand how the people in India are able to do international trade in America in a lot of different areas in technology and so forth, but we are not able to do the same kind. And that's what really, I'm so glad that you have that experience, because I look forward to working with you, and you might want to elaborate on that.
Congressman, I think it's related to what I was saying before, that it's encouraging to know that we are taking a new look at our trade posture and that we are starting to look at one-on-one agreements, because I think that this change of trade posture is going to have a measurable effect on what those trade balances are. So I look forward, as you do, I'm sure, to see how this evolves over the next few years.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and the ranking member is recognized to ask a question.
Just one question. So we know that there are 6 federal agencies that share responsibility in providing export assistance to small businesses: SBA, Commerce, USDA, and the Exim Bank. You talk about liquidity and access to capital, so I hope that you do a better job at getting Exim Bank to continue to do the job that they've done, since they cannot make loans larger than 10 million now. You have seen an increase in lending for small businesses for the first time, exceeded 50%, used to be 20%. So you are the chair of the TPCC.
That is correct, Ranking Member
Okay.
Velasquez.
So I hope that you will take upon yourself to clear issues over jurisdiction as it relates to all these 6 federal agencies.
I will absolutely take that under advisement, Congressman Velasquez.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady yields back. And we want to thank the witness for his testimony here. And the chair would like to commend members on both sides for their participation today and the incisiveness and the brevity of some of the questions as well. We've fit a lot in, I think, in an hour and 8 minutes here. So I think great attendance by both sides, and I think you did an admirable job for having been in the position no more than 3 weeks. Very impressive. And as you know, ensuring that America's small businesses have every opportunity to export is essential, and I hope that this hearing encourages the OIT to continue improving its outreach and training efforts and better coordinate federal resources for small businesses all across this country. And I would ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. And if there's no further business to come before the committee, we're adjourned. Thank you.